All right, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our session today, exploring our sightlines, integrating local stories across subject areas. I'm Philippa Rappaport. I'm the Head of Education and Engagement at the Smithsonian Office of Educational Technology. That's a central education office at the Smithsonian and the office behind the Smithsonian Learning Lab. And I'm joined today by Mia Cariello, Jonathan Jalbert, and Andrea Kim Neighbors from the Smithsonian American Pacific American Center. Behind the scenes, we also have Rhett Ransom, who's our IT support specialist at the Office of Educational Technology. So in our session today, we'll explore a new virtual tour experience that's based on the exhibition Sightlines, Chinatown and Beyond. While it was showing at the Smithsonian American Art Museum from September 2024 to November 2025, Sightlines provided visitors with glimpses into the complexity and depth of Asian American connections to Washington, D.C. across time. And through artwork, material culture, images, and other graphic material from Smithsonian collections and also local D.C. community members, this session will address the importance of multicultural storytelling and emphasize how local places can be integrated into any school subject area. You'll leave the session today with actionable strategies to help students explore the importance of documenting local places and also connect to national histories and movements. Today is also pretty special. You'll get a sneak peek at this very cool and interesting resource with multiple possible uses for learning. And we're looking forward to showcasing it today and also to learning how you think you might use it in your classrooms. So as we get started, I see some of you are already introducing yourselves in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. If you need to use captions, you can just click on the Show Captions button. We'd love for this session to be as interactive as possible, so please share your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll try to respond in real time to that, but if not, we'll catch your questions at some point during the session. So today's session is part of a 10-part series that we're calling Celebrating America at 250. And this is a series that's intended to explore teaching techniques and strategies and resources to help tell the story of America's 250th and to support student learning at this milestone moment in American history. The series celebrates well-known people, events, and accomplishments of our nation, and also provides opportunities to discuss lesser-told histories that together form our national narrative. So we hope that you'll leave each session with a collection of techniques and ideas to help students think critically, recognize their own value, appreciate others' perspectives, and gain confidence to be engaged learners. So the slide that you see here shows our One Hub page, and I'll put that link in the chat in just a sec. And that's where you can find the links to register for upcoming sessions and where you can also find our archived sessions. And then if you look at the descriptive material, you'll also find the link to the Learning Lab collection. And we'll keep populating this page throughout the year. We create a Learning Lab collection for each session. So I'll also put into the chat the link to the Learning Lab collection to accompany today's session. So let's dive in. A reminder that today's session is being recorded. And we like to start off with a question. So today's question is, what are your memories or impressions of Chinatown? And I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Philippa, and thank you everyone for joining us today. If it's not clear from the question, we'll be talking a bit about Chinatown today. I can start us off answering. My mom and my grandparents are from Taiwan, and I'm originally from Houston, Texas. So I grew up going to the Bel Air Chinatown in Houston. There's a lot of great food there. I grew up going to the Taiwanese Center there. Took some language classes and accompanied my grandparents to their dance classes. So Um, very fond memories of Chinatown, and uh, I don't know that I like fully comprehended where I was as a child, but uh, definitely fond memories of it. I think my colleagues Mia and Andrea might also have some answers to share.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, and so we didn't have a local Chinatown. But when I visited Chinatown for the first time in New York City, I was really amazed by how many um, food restaurants there were, but also seeing a lot of community members out talking to each other on the street, playing games. And it was really exciting time to see that different culture and vibe than what I was used to back in Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to meet all of you. My first experience with Chinatown in a really in-depth way was Seattle's Chinatown International District. I had the great privilege of working there for a few years at the Wing Luke Museum, which is in a beautiful old former tenement museum or tenement building that became a museum, where many of the earliest immigrants from China, Japan, and the Philippines lived. And so it was great to be able to be in Chinatown every day and learn more about the history and many of the thriving businesses who are there even today.
Yeah, so please continue to share your memories or impressions of Chinatown in the chat. We'd love to hear um, anything you want to share, and I think maybe we can read through some of those on our own as we jump into the tour that we've got planned for you today. So um, here we go. We'll dive right in. So I'm going to be giving you a tour. I'm Jonathan again. I'm a gallery educator with the Asian Pacific American Center at the Smithsonian. I'll be giving you a tour today of the Sightlines, Chinatown and Beyond exhibition. Like Philippa said, this was up at the Smithsonian American Art Museum from September of 2024 to November of 2025. If you've been to the American Art Museum or the National Portrait Gallery, they're in the same building. You might know that the building is located right next to DC's Chinatown. So now we're virtually in the room where it's all going to happen. I'll be giving a tour for about 25 to 30 minutes, and we'll talk about some local stories today around DC, how those local stories have helped to shape DC as a city, and how those stories fit into the history of our nation as we look back on 250 years of America. So yeah, please feel free to put questions and comments in the chat. My colleagues will help answer them, and let's dive right in. Um, so yeah, we've got a nice 3D representation of the space. I like to start the tours with this map on the ground. You can see the UR here in orange. That is the American Art Museum. And if you could see past these panels straight ahead through the windows, you'd be looking just down a block into DC's Chinatown, which is fairly small, just a few blocks represented here. And you'll notice that there are these three big arrows pointing into this one intersection in Chinatown. And those three arrows represent three objects that are, you can think of them as sightlines or glimpses into some communities that we'll be looking at today that all sort of intersect in Chinatown and that introduce us to the three sections of our exhibition within Sightlines. So first we'll be in Making Place, which has sort of two competing um, visions for how you make a place. A place is made up of buildings and of people, and we'll talk about some of the distinctions there. We have Transforming Tradition, which covers a lot of the martial arts history and traditions that have really thrived in Washington, D.C., especially in the African American communities of Southeast D.C., and how those communities too have been connected with Chinatown. And then last but not least, back in the corner over there, we'll have Visualizing Identity, which is the section is about a local mixed race Javanese American muralist who's very prolific. She's done tons and tons of murals around the DC area. Her name is Cita Sadeli. Um, Her artist name is Miss Shelov, and and that will be a lot of fun to look at. So without further ado, we'll dive into making place. And our first anchor object, as you can see, the arrow points right down to the middle of Chinatown. This is the Friendship Archway, which is sort of an iconic landmark within DC's Chinatown. Just take a minute and take it in. Make some observations. Feel free to share them in the chat. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what stands out to you all. And we try to think of this as sort of an artistic, close-looking exercise. Really notice the colors, the scale of it, the surroundings, how the archway connects or doesn't connect to its surroundings. Some things I definitely notice on my first look, and as I've looked at it a lot more, the colors obviously stand out. There are these kind of maybe drab looking office buildings in the back, and we have really bright reds and golds that contrast nicely with those buildings. You can see on the right side here, there's some mimicking in the architectural style between the building and the archway. And if you've been to, the archway exists in real life. If you've been to DC's Chinatown, you might notice that the building next to it doesn't quite look like that. This is an artistic rendering. You notice that the archway is really big. These people look pretty small in comparison. It spans this whole large avenue. So those are some of the things that might stand out. Yeah, I see a comment in the chat. Traditional architecture representing meeting with modernity. Yeah, absolutely. So it's very traditional. It looks almost like it's from a different time, and that'll get us right into some of the history we'll be talking about today. So a trivia question for you. Feel free to put answers in the chat. When do you think the first Chinatown archway in an American Chinatown was built? Maybe you've seen other archways similar to this in Chinatowns around the country or the world. I'll tell you sort of my thinking when I first thought about it. My thinking was, maybe in grade school I learned about Chinese Americans coming in the mid-1800s to work maybe in the gold rush or on the railroads out west. Maybe after a little while, into the late 1800s, they would have established enough, community and capital to create something like this. 1875, I see in there. The DC Archway seems newer compared to the San Francisco one. Yeah, so the San Francisco one is the oldest in the country, and that was created in 1969. So I was completely off too in my guess. 1969 is the first one that we see, and so this one was actually built in 1986. And so this whole period of the late 60s into the 70s and 80s, we see these changes in economy, in urban centers. There's what they call urban renewal and investment too, of cities start putting more money into their downtowns. Things get more expensive. The people who had maybe historically lived there get pushed out or displaced. And so that sets up part of the backdrop of how the archway came to be. And this one, this is called the Friendship Archway. Specifically, it was also meant to be a sign of friendship between the US and China. So in 1972, President Nixon opens up China and establishes diplomatic ties between the US and China. And then also around that time, DC starts having its own mayor for the first time. And so in the early 80s, DC's mayor, Marion Barry, puts together a delegation of folks, including the architect of the archway, Alfred Liu, and together they go over to Beijing to create a sister city agreement where they want to have a symbol of the friendship between Beijing and DC as sister capitals of our respective countries. And so Alfred Liu is commissioned to design this archway. Alfred Liu was originally from Taiwan. He ended up studying in New York City and doing some architectural work in the Manhattan Chinatown. And some of that work is still there today. And then he came down to DC. So he wasn't originally from the DC Chinatown, but he saw all of these economic changes happening, people being displaced in the DC Chinatown, and he wanted to think about um, how maybe that could change and the area could be revitalized to benefit the Chinese residents of Chinatown. And so this is all part of his grand plan that he thought of in sort of the frame of extinction or distinction is what he called it. So the distinction would be this, you build a monument like this as sort of a tourist attraction, right? People come to Washington, D.C. from all over the world, all over the country to visit the great nation's capital. And perhaps historically, the Chinese Americans who live there haven't been as visible. And so he thought being visible was a big requirement for the area to really be revitalized. And he preferred that over extinction, which, of course, the neighborhood fizzling out is not what he wanted. So jump over here. You can see some of Alfred Liu's plans for DC's Chinatown. On top of the archway, there were these sort of Chinese-styled lanterns that do exist still there in Chinatown today. They line the streets. We've got, you might recognize some of these circle drawings up here. These are animals of the Chinese zodiac. So these were put into the sidewalks around DC Chinatown, laid into the bricks as sidewalk pavers. And you can find those still today in DC's Chinatown. And then we'll look at a map. We love maps in this exhibition. This is a map of Alfred Liu's proposed sort of architectural projects throughout DC's Chinatown. And so he wanted to really, all throughout the neighborhood, have this very strong visual imprint, almost like a theme park, right, of people coming in to see visual aspects of the neighborhood that look different from the rest of the city and that would contribute to businesses and really feel like a thriving Chinese American community. And so that's sort of the top-down architectural approach to, like we say here, designing the future or to making a place. And you might see how that's different from the idea of making a place rather than maybe focusing on the built environment. You could focus on the people who live there, right? The people make up the place. And so this section of Making Place, called Building on the Past, looks at a group of mostly young folks. They called themselves Eastern Wind, starting in the late 60s and into the 70s in Washington, D.C. And these were Asian Americans. Maybe they had moved as kids from Asia or had been born and raised in Washington, D.C. But they were really curious about defining community as the people and sort of the local landmarks, right? Rather than designing new things, they were looking at, you can see this map, they made a walking tour of the neighborhood. And it's got restaurants, it's got markets, grocery stores, churches, both African American and Chinese. These were the places that these folks at least felt that they were, spending their lives and going to on a day-to-day basis, and really interacting with their neighbors, right? That's what made it a neighborhood, is the people. Another project that Eastern Wind got up to is they were commissioned actually for the bicentennial, the 200th birthday of America, to create this mural that you can see up top called Chinese in America, Past, Present, and Future. So this was in 1976, the 200th birthday. And you can see some of the past, some of the historical events that Chinese Americans are associated with. So crossing the ocean, working on the railroads, being out west in the mountains. And then the present and the future you can see up top. Some of what they depicted is a an intergenerational family, all the different generations supporting each other. So the kids studying, working up to want to be professionals, working all sorts of jobs, cooking and those sorts of things, and then also the young cultivating relationships with their elders, and this idea of sort of a family being a strong um, motivator, and everybody wanting to contribute to the family. And so, these are different ideas of how to make a place, right? Focus on the people versus the built environment. And that can take us back to the Friendship Arch, which I mentioned. Or maybe I mentioned the Beijing and DC governments had decided that together they would build this. And originally, Beijing was going to contribute half of the funds for the Archway. And a lot of folks living in Chinatown didn't have a great view of the Chinese government. They had maybe even fled China, and so they weren't very appreciative of city funds and collaboration with Beijing putting up this big thing in their neighborhood that maybe they didn't want there. Even if other folks in the city did want it, they're competing visions for how the neighborhood should be represented. And this is the American story, right? Is folks come from all over and make a place a home, and maybe from an outside perspective, sometimes the Chinese American community is seen as homogenous, but really there are very different views for how the community should best thrive or best be represented to their neighbors. And really the challenge of America and what we're doing every day is to figure out how to live with each other, right? And work through those tensions and those differences in vision. So that's making place. And we'll jump over now to transforming tradition. Please continue to put questions in the chat. We appreciate all that, and we'll continue to try to answer them. This will be fun. We can walk on over here. So transforming tradition, I like to start at this work of art, which you can see the title down here at the bottom, Safety Jacket, A Morning in Chinatown. That's morning with a U. And this piece was made by artist Terrence Nicholson, who's a DC native, an African-American man. He gets up to all sorts of things. He's been in a touring jazz group, a hip-hop group. He's a rock musician. He's an international kung fu champion, and of course, here he's also a sculptor. So he made this piece in 2016, shortly after his kung fu teacher's studio had been forced closed. He had the teacher, Cece Liu, whose studio was at the arrow, where it was located within Chinatown, where that arrow was pointing. He was sort of evicted from where his studio had been in Chinatown, and he gave all of his extra belts to Terrence. And Terrence really felt like, he'd grown up in Southeast DC, going into Chinatown maybe to eat with his family. And then as a young man, he had really come into himself learning martial arts at this studio, and its closing and the kicking out of his teacher really felt like the end of a chapter. And so he felt he needed to mourn that. He bleached all these belts really beautifully, and for a sense of scale, this has something like an 8-foot wingspan, so this is really quite a large jacket. And he felt, at learning the martial arts and having that community to root him in really was also a sense of safety that he was mourning as well. And Terrence is part of a long tradition of martial arts thriving in DC. This section also tells the story of another martial arts studio, Simba Dojang. And so this takes us back to some of the 1900s military history of the United States. We were in wars in Asia, in Korea, and Vietnam, and a lot of veterans, while they were overseas in Asia, had maybe encountered martial arts, had learned a thing or two, wanted to continue practicing. Also, the 1965 Immigration Act allowed a lot more East Asian immigrants into the US, and some of them came in and set up martial arts studios, and so there was sort of a thriving ecosystem of martial artists happening, and in DC it really took root. and Phil Cunningham and Furman Marshall, two black veterans from Southeast DC. Um, they really valued their martial arts education, and they wanted um, the kids in the area they were living, who were mostly black and poor, they wanted those kids to be able to learn and benefit from that teaching as well. And so they started Simba Dojang as a very, very cheap sort of community effort. And the kids in the neighborhood really took to it. So you can see they've won all these trophies right here. They were called Washington, D.C.'s winningest karate studio, even though they do practice Taekwondo. Everything was called karate back then. And yeah, they really kicked butt. They went up and down the East Coast, sort of pooling their resources, borrowing buses, and going to tournaments along the East Coast, winning all these trophies. There's at least one mother-daughter pair in these trophy winners. So a mother who was in Simba Dojang, and then later her daughter was. So yeah, there are many, many more stories located in this section. We'll be telling you shortly how you can hopefully explore more of those stories. I do want to take us on over to visualizing identity. And it's interesting, I do want to make the point, I guess, yeah, one more thing about Chinatown is that this was actually not the first Chinatown in DC. The first one was before the 1930s, roughly where the National Gallery of Art is now. That area was eminent domained to build the National Mall, essentially, in Federal Triangle. And so the Chinese residents there moved out and set up shop where they are now, where this DC Chinatown is now. And so you can see these areas of DC really go through a lot of change over the decades. And that is part of the backdrop, not that time period, but just continuously going through change is part of the backdrop for this muralist, Cita Sadeli's story. You can see her name here in a beautiful Indonesian nameplate, and over here, Miss Shelov is her artist name. And she grew up just outside of DC on the Maryland side. She really loved the underground music scene. She talks about how as a kid she would see some of these areas that had gone through a lot of change. Some of them were still sort of destroyed and hadn't been reinvested in since the riots after the death of Martin Luther King Jr. in the late 60s. And so parts of DC that hadn't been reinvested in yet, she would see these shoots of life pop up. Even while she was a kid, she would see graffiti art on some of the walls. And she found a thriving underground music scene of hip hop and dance music. So she talks about going to these all ages concerts and getting to really enjoy music with other folks. There was a do-it-yourself kind of culture where everybody wanted to give everything a try, be hands-on and make things together. And so that's how she got into it as a youngster. Eventually started getting commissioned to do all sorts of murals all around DC. And I wanted to share a clip from an interview I did with Cita about her mother, who's, there's sort of this aspect of underground music and sort of American culture that she grew up in that very much informs her art. And that sort of comes together in her art with her maybe ethnic and familial identity. So here's a clip from Cita.
I grew up in the area about 10 minutes outside the DC line in Hyattsville, Maryland. We grew up in the oldest house in Hyattsville. Myself, the youngest of 4 kids, raised by a single mom from Java, Indonesia. She came here as a Fulbright scholar and then continued with her schooling and having her kids and moved to the area from Indiana, where she was studying, to work at the Library of Congress. So that's kind of our origin story as to why we're here in this area. She was there for a few years and then switched to a position as a broadcast journalist at the Voice of America, just a couple blocks away. So mother's from Java, Indonesia. My dad's, a mix of Western European ancestry. And what's interesting is being raised by a Javanese woman in Indonesia outside of our culture without the father around. So it was, my cultural identity is something that has always been a super mixed bag. And I think you'll hear this from a lot of biracial folks or multiracial folks, is that they don't immediately feel like they fit in with either portion of their ancestry. For us, I think it's amplified by the fact that we lost my mom 20 years ago. And so that connection was severed to our culture. And we don't speak Indonesian so well. So it really takes a lot to maintain those ties with our Indonesian family. But in my art, I think it's me seeking that connection between my culture and me, but also my mother and me, and how she plays into that so fundamentally. We saw our culture through her and kind of looked up to her for that, because we weren't connected to our paternal side so much. My grandparents were great folks, but they had died, early on. And so there was a lot of empty space that we were trying to fill, but also being super inspired by American culture and the things that I've mentioned about punk and, underground music culture, hip hop, dance music in all of its forms. Thinking about my own mother and her loss, and how I felt like if her name wasn't spoken, she was forgotten. In my work, you'll often see the name Enny, E-N-N-Y, and that's my mother's sort of nickname growing up. So you'll see that in the gong in that piece.
Yeah, so the gong piece she's talking about is here. You can see her mother's nickname, Enny, up at the top. She's also painting it in this photograph here. It's right on this little character in this mural on the left. So I find it very moving to think about all of these different identities, right? The section is called Visualizing Identity. There's Cita's sort of ethnic identity, her relationship with her mother. There's also her American DIY identity of wanting to get in the weeds of everything, and all sorts of different identities that come together, along with her background in street art. You can see a lot of her art supplies. How these all come together to create her very unique artistic style. And so her art becomes a visualization of that combination of heritage and American upbringing. And yeah, I think that it's a beautiful visualization of the American experience. So with that, thank you very much for joining me on the tour, and I'll be handing it off to my esteemed colleague, Mia Cariello.
Hey everyone, thank you so much, Jonathan, for giving us a fabulous tour of Sightlines. You all watched a few of the features that we have with Jonathan's tour, but I'm going to take the next few minutes to explain the features a little more in depth, and also why we created this digitized exhibit in the first place. And so the main driving force of why we created this virtual tour for you all is because we recognize that not everyone has the opportunity to come visit us in Washington, D.C. And Sightlines unfortunately closed this past November 2025. And so we wanted a way to share Sightlines with everyone in the nation and the world to explore past its close. As you saw Jonathan moving around the space, capturing the actual physicality of the exhibition was our primary goal, so it would feel as if you were actually in the gallery with us right here. One of the things that you can do, as Jonathan demoed, is click the circle on this floor to navigate yourself around the exhibition as if you were walking around the gallery in person. Another option, in addition to clicking the circles, is going to the menu on the left side of the screen and clicking various different spots in the exhibition based on what topic you might be interested in, including mural mapping, etc. As you might have noticed, this tour is created with very high resolution imagery. And so Jonathan, if you could just zoom in really good to get a good sight of what the map looks like. You'll be able to read like street names and things, but we really wanted the our virtual visitors to be able to engage with the resources, the text labels, the objects, and the artwork as if you're really there and getting up close and personal with the artwork. There are a few things that you might notice, like the bottom of this map. It's a little distorted, right? Because we're a little high up. It seems not quite straight on. One of the things that we've added to make sure that you get the best experience in this virtual tour are these magnifying glass icons. So if you click it, you'll actually be able to see this space without any distortion in a high resolution image. You can zoom in, drag your mouse around to explore, or even use the menu on the top left-hand part of the pop-up to be directed to a specific part on this big mural map. And when Jonathan was talking about Cita's just like her expansive collections of murals across DC, you can sort of explore this here. Thank you. And in addition to capturing the physicality of the space, we also were thinking about how to enhance sightlines for our virtual visitors. And one way that we decided to do this, and that you saw with the clip that Jonathan had shown you, is through audio clips with the actual community members or artists talking about the photographs, objects, or artworks in the collection. And so if you click on any of the headphone icons in the exhibit, such as this one right here, you'll be greeted with a pop-up that you can move around the screen to get a better look if it's in your way of reading something. It'll have a short description of what the audio clip is about, a photograph of the speaker, an audio player telling you how long the clip is if you click play, in addition to a transcript. So for those of you who like to read a little more than you want to listen, this is for you, and also to make sure that all of our clips are accessible to our audience members. In addition to the transcript, we also have a related resource section with most of the pop-ups showing various resources from the Smithsonian or other community resources that could help you explore the history of this resource or any topics discussed in the audio clip. And I hope that you use this tour and related resource section to continue exploring how DC's Chinatown, this very local story, might have influence or connect to your national stories and national narratives where you are. And with that, I'll pass it over to Andrea to talk about how this tour could be used in the classroom.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Jonathan. I've already had some great chats or conversations with some folks here in the chat about fourth grade connections, place geography connections. I also love that we have folks joining us from all over the country, from Pittsburgh to Topeka. And so what I'm going to do is share some really big picture tips on how you can use this virtual tour and even the big ideas of what Sightlines is all about, which is about place and belonging, how you can bring that into the classroom. So as we just witnessed, Sightlines brings the stories of Asian American lived experiences in Washington, D.C. to visitors around the country and also around the world. This virtual tour, once it's available, and we can't wait to share it with you so you can spend some time with the experience, it can be used in a classroom as a complement to lessons focused on U.S. history, even world history, other topics in social studies, even activities about who has shaped your community. While Sightlines, this exhibition is focused on one location, one geographic location of Washington, D.C., the virtual tour can be applied to broader discussions about histories of ethnic enclaves and immigrant communities in your locality, no matter where you are, and how people forged a sense of place and belonging. It also can be a great example of how one place can have global interconnections to different times in history and different times in the world, or different places in the world, I'm sorry. And so this tour, it can also be used for lessons about the arts. As you learn about several visual artists here, perhaps it can lead to some lessons and activities about what DIY means and looks like in your community. It's also a great example of oral histories. Jonathan did a fabulous job interviewing many of the people that you see in this virtual tour, asking them great questions about their lived experiences, what this place of DC means for them. It's a great example for how you and your students can ask people in your community questions about why this place is home for them. This is also a great example for lessons about Asian American history. or if you're interested in learning about Asian American history, every box, the pop-up that Mia showed you, not only includes the audio clip where you can meet a person and hear about their story, it also will take you to related resources to learn more about various milestone moments in Asian American history, such as the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, the Korean War, the experience of American GIs in Asia, but also post-1965 immigration and much, much more. So, and also since Jonathan focused on the DC Chinatown Archway, we had some great conversations in the chat about different archways, our guesses about the years. There are many great resources about the establishment of Chinese American communities through Chinatowns across the country. So, and how you may think about creating your own sightlines in the classroom. We have some very broad ideas. There are many ways in which you can start to replicate or to adapt the idea of sightlines into your classroom. So if you want to approach a project-based learning opportunity with your students, the Sightlines virtual tour can be used as an example for how and why local stories are shared and why they're told. You can replicate your own sightlines with your students by considering a visit to a local history museum, your local library, or a local archive or historical society, or even simply go on a walk around your neighborhood and simply notice what's around you. Notice businesses, notice organizations in your community, notice who lives in your community and what their stories are. These 3 questions can be a great way to spark curiosity or even to begin the process of just noticing with your students. Together, you can ask who is in your community, how did they shape this community, and why do they call this place home? These are great questions that can be asked repeatedly, as they may, even with the same person, you may reveal new layers to a story that you hadn't known before. So you can with these questions as a start, you can start to formulate more specific questions that are tied to your locality. I know we have some folks here from Pittsburgh. I'm learning a lot about Pittsburgh's Chinatown, excuse me. But also we have folks here from Topeka, Kansas. Simply by going out and asking questions, I'm sure you have done that already many times, that can reveal so much of what exists within your sightline from where you are right now. So as a closing question, before you leave, and I welcome everyone to share this in the chat, I would love to know about a story in your locality that you want to learn more about. And hopefully this presentation has inspired new questions or aha moments, or if there is a place or person that you've noticed in your community and you think, I'd like to learn more about them, I would love for you to share in the chat what local stories you might want to engage with your students in the classroom. I can tell you as you're entering your answers into the chat, our work at the APA Center in our education department, we focus very heavily on the power of hyper-local storytelling, not just in Washington, D.C., but in other parts across the U.S. Even though we are very focused on the national, local, regional, and even global scale of Asian American history, we know Asian American shows up in places like Ohio. In fact, Mia and I are working on a project right now that sheds some light on an Asian American leader in Akron, Ohio. We're learning about Asian American communities in the northern part of North Carolina, even along the Buford Highway in Atlanta. Our stories are everywhere in the places you may least expect. And that's just, for us speaking from the Asian American Center, and we know there are fascinating stories everywhere. So I hope everyone's just taking some time to share their stories with us or thinking for themselves what they might want to think about with their students. But I look forward to hearing from you and seeing how you might start asking some great questions with your students. Yes. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be here looking out in the chat here. Sierra, I will be answering your questions shortly. Yes, and Sierra, we can also send you a copy of the resource from Akron, Ohio. It's almost done. Carrie, thank you. I'd like to learn more about the history of communities living and working in South Street Seaport in New York City. I would like to learn about that as well. I can leave my email in the chat, and if you have any aha moments after this presentation, we'd love to hear about it. Great. All right, Philippa, off to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. This was so informative and so interesting. And I love the questions that you posed at the end, Andrea. I could see how you could move right into a whole range of activities with it. So we'll stop sharing in just a minute, but I wanted to just ask you to show people what's in the Learning Lab collection. So we're looking at that now, and I'll put that link again in the chat for people. Oh, I see what just happened. It was open. Okay, forget that. I'm going to stop sharing, and why don't we just go right to Q&A? Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Do you mind just explaining what's in here, Andrea?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So the Learning Lab collection here provides some high-res images of some of the objects that we looked at today, such as the illustration of the Chinatown Gate from Washington, D.C. This is a great image to, well, when you have access to the virtual tour, you can zoom in to see all of the fine detail, but this image here will also allow you to do the same thing. You also see copies of images around some of the key objects in the exhibition, such as a lot of the sculptures, of the works on paper as well. And we also have links to the Sightlines Atlas, which is an extension of the virtual tour and the exhibition itself. The Sightlines Atlas takes you outside of the exhibition and into other parts of Washington, D.C. proper to expand the story of Asian American history in D.C. You can also read more articles about Cita Sadeli's work, the history of the martial arts community here in DC, and also visit our website.
Awesome, thank you. So I put the link in the chat for that. Does anyone have any questions for our presenters today? And I'm also putting in, oh good, I see something coming up. But I'm also putting a link in the chat there. We'd love to hear your feedback so we can improve our sessions. And that link is in the chat. Do you see any questions here? I wrote down one that came up previously, if there's nothing else. Okay, why don't I read that one out? It said, observation about DC Arch. It's more blue than the older red and black and gold in the previous Chinatown arches. Is there a reason for the emphasis of the blue color instead of red?
I don't know if I have the answer for that, but it's a great question. And I think one thing that does come to mind, though, about the archway that I didn't get to bring up is that actually when Alfred Liu was in China designing the archway, he worked with Chinese artisans over there to have it constructed. And it was built in sort of a modular way, so it was all of these different pieces that fit together. Um, so it's actually put together over that large street without any nails or screws. It all just kind of fits in, and they slot into each other to create this really large structure. So I don't know about the color, but I do love that fact about the construction of it. We'll have to look into that.
Great, thank you. I don't think I'm seeing any other questions. So I'd just like to thank our three presenters, Jonathan, Mia, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here today. We look forward to seeing the tour when it's live. Oh, and I should say we'll add the link to the tour into the Learning Lab collection when it's ready. So thank you all, and thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you at a Cultivating Learning session, I hope, in the new year. Bye, everyone.